Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, every single day. Hey, before we get started, I do want to let you know the Grove Collective are doing their March to Victory campaign. This is a bracket-style tournament pitting regions of the United States against each other to see who can give the most to the Grove Collective and Ole Miss Athletics. Their goal, $10 million in March and 10,000 members. That sounds attainable. The first round, the Sweet 16, goes through March 18th. You can contribute there to getting that final 8 and head your region towards victory. Go to thegrovecollective.com/march to victory. Again, thegrovecollective.com/march to victory for more information. I'm Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm joined by Brantley Sanderson, and we're going to be talking about the Lady Rebs and what Coach Yo has to look for. You know, Brantley, before we get started, Coach Yo just got named as the coach of the senior women's national team for the Bahamas for like the next 3 to 4 years. That's a pretty cool deal.
Oh yeah, you know, she's truly the Bahamian queen of basketball. And I know she had some involvement with the men's team, men's national team before, but I didn't know about that. That's great for her. I think she should have been named Coach of the Year in the SEC. So I'm glad she's getting some recognition elsewhere.
Yeah, and we've gotten to the point where the Ole Miss Lady Rebels just got eliminated from the SEC tournament by the LSU Tigers, and we've gotten to the point where Ole Miss needs to start beating LSU. That's probably the next step in this program's development. Now, if you beat LSU, you're right up there in the conversation with everybody in that league. You can beat just about anyone, but it's an interesting situation. They played them tough. They kind of passed the look test. They did a lot of stuff that maybe got them off of that 8-9 line in the NCAA tournament, which was a goal going into this. But what are your thoughts from that game?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think we definitely passed the look test. We kept it not only close, but I mean, you know, they had trouble stopping us a lot of times. It wasn't like we were, you know, chasing them the whole game. And if you can do that against LSU, then, you know, they're the defending national champs for a reason. You know, you should be able to do that to anyone else. You know, I think one of the things we talked about last week was getting some help beyond the big three, you know, and that second team really starting to emerge. And that just didn't happen enough, you know. The Maddie, Marquisha, Toddy had really strong games. You know, when the three of them are clicking, it is really hard to stop the offense. But we just didn't have enough step up, you know, and it's obviously we were missing a starter. She was replaced by a freshman point guard. So, you know, I think we are getting to the point where that's going to happen with more regularity. But, you know, I think it's just those kind of building blocks and, you know, very few coaches, very few teams have the kind of success that LSU has had in the second year and third year of a coach. But she's, you know, won multiple national championships for a reason. So we're getting there. We're closer. And I think if we can just get those, you know, that fourth, fifth, sixth contributor really stepping up consistently, then we're going to be able to pull off those big wins. And by the way, I'm joined by Luca, and he is the true expert in this house.
Okay. Yeah. My Labrador is sitting out in the living room, and his name is Archie for obvious reasons.
You're a true fan.
Yes. So you have a situation to where, you know, I think LSU's they're coached by a crazy person, and she's psychotic, and that's okay. I mean, she's really good at what she does, but this SEC tournament is going to be known for one thing, and it has nothing to do with the play that was happening on the floor. There was a brawl that broke out between South Carolina and LSU, and they ended up ejecting every bench player in that game. And we don't know. Some of those I think are going to get to play in the NCAA tournament, but the roster is not going to be at full strength for either team. Now, it's not going to matter. They're both probably going to be playing 16s, but that's beside the point. And also somebody jumped the scores table to get into a fight. A guy did. And it was like, wait, are you really stepping up on a women's basketball player, man? And just weirdness happened. And that overshadowed the fact that I'm just going to say, it was like my high school crush was Kelly Jolly, who Kelly Harper now, the Tennessee coach. So I'm always a secret Tennessee basketball fan just because I like the way she played back in the day. When I think that was like when Shamika Holsclaw and those guys, those girls were playing at Tennessee. But you thought about them leaving a person wide open, they bank in a three, and they had a chance to beat South Carolina. You thought that was going to be the story of this tournament. That was going to be the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day later, everything changed.
Yeah, that's and it's sad that's how it ended, and that's what people walked away talking about, because there was some really, really, really high level basketball being played. I share your assessment of LSU's coach. I think anytime you play LSU, you're playing the players, you're playing her, because she's on the court for most of the game. And she does a very good job of intimidating the refs. So they just get a lot going their way. I thought it was also very telling how she handled it post game, and just kind of made some comments that, a coach in that position should never make. Dawn Staley handled that so well, and she took accountability. The player, immediately apologized after the game. And I had some similar thoughts to you, but when that guy jumped the court, I don't know if you noticed, when he saw just how big Cardoso was, he kind of took a few steps back. And I would do that to a 6'7" woman as well, but I wouldn't jump the court to begin with. But yeah, I think, I'm also a secret Lady Vol fan because of Pat Summitt, and I'm always rooting for them. And I literally felt my stomach just drop to the pits when that happened. Like, you saw it on Kelly Harper's face, just the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat that keeps us all coming back in sports. And it would have, believe it or not, she, a coach that has taken two teams to the Sweet 16 2 years in a row, can still be on the hot seat. And there's a lot of Lady Vol fans who want to change. And
I thought because of the name that's on the court.
Of course, it's a little, it's a little bit of high standards, but also a little bit of delusion. We can say that. But you really saw, for those split seconds, I saw it in her face that she was getting that, talking about getting the big win, getting that off your back finally. And like, just being real. And there just isn't really an explanation for how that play, played out. Now, granted, the girl's never hit a 3-pointer in her life. So I can understand why you might leave somebody open. And, she said the person who was guarding her, they wanted her closer to the rim in case they, threw a lob or anything like that. But, in those circumstances, your player instincts have just got to take over, and you just got to know, with 1 second left, everybody's a shooter, and you can't give anybody a shot because they just might luck up and make it.
Yeah, and it's not like Shaq's out there. In women's basketball, everybody can shoot a three, whether they have or not. They can all make that shot, and you have to, I think, come at it from that angle to where, I cannot let this woman play horse out there, because if that happens, I'm going to lose.
And, I think a lot of this just goes to show just how much luck is involved in having an undefeated season or winning a national championship. Just how much has to go your way, because I don't think anybody was thinking that South Carolina is going to pull this out with 1.1 second left. But it's sometimes the basketball gods smile upon you, and that's really the only way to explain what happened on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, let's change the subject to the NCAA tournament. I think they will find out Sunday. At some point, Sunday or Monday, they will announce it. The question that's going to be on all Ole Miss fans' mind is, can Ole Miss avoid that 8 or 9 seed? Because you want to avoid a 1. Give us a rundown of who you think the top 4 teams are going to be, and what does the 2 and 3 lines look like?
Well, I think, there's not really, other than South Carolina, the teams that are going to be on the 1, 2, and 3 seed line, I think, are all pretty similar. There's a lot of parity out in the top 10 this year in women's basketball. I think I was just looking at Charlie Krim's bracketology, and he's got us as a 7 seed, which means we would play a 2 seed. Right now, he's got us playing UCLA, who is a very good team. They actually have, if you remember last year, Stanford had a 6'7" freshman center. She is now at UCLA and is their main player. They've also got a couple other freshmen that are really freshmen and sophomores that are really good. So I'm looking at either UCLA, Ohio State, Texas. LSU is probably going to be a 2 seed, which we know we're not going to get matched up with them. So if you look at some of the 3 seeds, you're thinking maybe UConn, maybe Notre Dame. All teams that are blue bloods of women's basketball. I am keeping my fingers crossed and hoping that we get that 6 seed, because that makes life a lot easier. But 6 or 7 is definitely what I'm expecting going into this.
Yeah, I'll find out what's going on. But if you had to say, hey, Steve, where's Ole Miss going? It just feels like it. They're going to send Ole Miss to Iowa. I'm convinced of it.
That for the matchups, you can't get much better than that. I don't know. I think they're probably going to be a number 1 seed because they won their conference tournament. They're the Big Ten champs. And they've been ranked towards the top 2, top 3 all year long. So I really don't see them dropping below a 1 seed. And I would be really pissed if we drop to an 8 or a 9 seed, because I don't think there are, 30 teams better than us in the tournament. So we'll see. I think what's more likely is either Ohio State or Texas. And of course, with Texas coming into the SEC next year, that could be really fun. They've got Vic Schaefer, who, as we all know, was Mississippi State's coach when they went to the Final Four and national championship recently. And he's done a really good job building them into, the Texas that we all expect them to be. So whether it's in Texas or Ohio or LA, we're going to have to, it's going to be a big lift. It's going to be on their home court. We're going to have to do what we did again last year to make it past the second round. But, it's all about matchups. It really is all about matchups at this time of year. And, you can get really lucky with that or not.
Yeah, I think for 2025, for next year, for Coach Yo, I think the goal should be host the first round of the NCAA. That I think they've gotten to that point.
Yeah. I think that's the next step in the process. And going back to what you said earlier, that means we're pulling off those, I guess you can't really call them upsets anymore, but we're beating the big dogs. I think the next year's schedule will probably look a little bit different. She's always done a good job of putting, a few ranked teams in the non-conference mix. But I think, to really get to that point where we're, our strength of schedule's got to get up, and we've got to play more of, the Power 5 teams that are doing really well in order to get that respect.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Brantley Sanderson joining us to talk Lady Rebs basketball like he always does. Thank you, man.
Thank you for having me.